My dad forgot to hang up. I heard him laugh and say, "He'll never amount to anything. Just a loser living off our name." I stayed quiet. Sold my $980,000 house. Moved everything. Disappeared. They came back from Europe, joking, until the key didn't work. I, 32M, never thought silence could be so loud. That's what I remember most about that phone call. Not the words themselves, but the deafening silence that followed when I realized my father hadn't hung up. It was a Tuesday afternoon in March. I was sitting in my home office, the one I'd spent months renovating in the house I bought with my own money, reviewing quarterly reports for the tech startup I'd co-founded 3 years earlier. My phone buzzed. Dad's name flashed across the screen. I picked up, said hello twice, heard nothing but muffled sounds. Pocket dial, I figured. I was about to hang up when I heard his voice, distant but clear enough. He was talking to someone. My mother, probably. They were planning their Europe trip, the one they'd been bragging about for months. 6 weeks across France, Italy, and Spain. Then I heard it. That laugh. The one he reserved for when he was being particularly cruel, thinking no one important was listening. He said I'd never amount to anything. Just a loser living off their name. That everything I had was because of the family reputation, not because of any actual talent. That I was an embarrassment they had to keep propping up. My mother's voice joined in, lighter but just as cutting, mentioning how they'd had to explain me away at the country club again last week. I sat there for 11 minutes. I know because I watched the call timer. 11 minutes of my parents dissecting my life, my choices, my worth. They talked about how I'd been a disappointment since college, how my business was probably failing and I was too proud to admit it, how they'd have to bail me out eventually like they always did. The thing is, they'd never bailed me out. Not once. I'd paid my own way through college with scholarships and part-time jobs. I'd built my company from nothing, sleeping 4 hours a night for 2 years. The house they were probably sitting in right now, the one they'd been staying at while their own place was being renovated, I'd bought it with my first major payout when we landed our series of funding. But in their version of reality, I was still the kid who couldn't tie his shoes right. The call ended. He'd finally found the phone in his pocket. I sat there staring at my computer screen, not seeing anything. My hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't racing. I just felt cold, like someone had opened a window in the middle of winter and forgotten to close it. I didn't call back, didn't send a text. Instead, I opened my laptop and started making calls of my own. First was my real estate agent. I told her I needed to sell the house, and I needed it done quietly and fast. She asked if everything was okay. I told her it was perfect, actually, just ready for a change. She'd sold me the place 2 years ago for $740,000. The market had gone insane since then. She said she could list it for $980,000 and it'd probably go in a week. I told her to make it happen. Next was my business partner. We'd been talking about expanding to the Seattle office anyway, making it our primary hub. I told him I wanted to fast-track that move. He was surprised, but not suspicious. I'd always been the more spontaneous one. He said he'd support whatever I decided. Then I called my attorney. I needed to restructure some things, I told him. Make sure certain people weren't listed on any of my accounts or emergency contacts. He asked if I was sure. I said I'd never been more certain of anything. My parents had keys to my house. They'd been using it as their own personal hotel for the past 6 weeks, while their place underwent renovations they'd insisted on. They were supposed to return from Europe in 2 weeks. I had 14 days to erase myself from their lives. The house sold in 4 days. Cash offer, $995,000. Buyer wanted to close in a week. I took it. I hired a moving company that specialized in quick relocations. Everything I owned was packed and loaded in 72 hours. I kept 1 suitcase of essentials and put everything else in storage in Seattle. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Not friends, not extended family, nobody. I forwarded my mail to a P.O. box. I changed my phone number, but kept the old one active, just silent. I wanted to see if they'd try to reach me. Spoiler, they didn't. The day before they were due back, I did a final walkthrough of the empty house. The new owners were taking possession the next morning. I'd had the locks changed the day before. My parents' keys would be useless. I left nothing behind except a single envelope on the kitchen counter. Inside was a note. Short. Simple. I wrote that I'd heard the phone call. Every word. That I'd spent 32 years trying to earn respect that was never going to come. That I was done auditioning for the role of their son. The house was sold. I'd moved. They wouldn't be able to reach me. I wished them well with their renovations. I didn't sign it. Didn't need to. I flew to Seattle that night. My apartment was temporary but comfortable. The company was thriving. My business partner asked if I was okay a few times those first weeks. I told him I was better than I'd been in years. It was true. 3 days after they returned from Europe, my old phone started blowing up. 17 missed calls from my mother. 9 from my father. Texts asking where I was, why the key didn't work, what was going on. Then confused messages. Then angry ones. Then worried ones. My mother's texts were panicked. She wrote that they'd come home to find the house empty, the locks changed, and a note that made no sense. She said I was being dramatic, that I'd misunderstood, that we needed to talk about this like adults. My father's messages were different. Defensive at first, then angry. He wrote that I was being childish, that I couldn't just disappear over a misunderstanding, that I owed them an explanation. By day 5, his tone shifted. He claimed he didn't remember any phone call, that even if he'd said something, I was taking it out of context. That families say things sometimes. It doesn't mean anything. I didn't respond to any of it. I watched the messages come in like I was reading someone else's story. They called my business partner. He told them honestly that he didn't know where I was staying, which was technically true. They called old friends. Most didn't know anything. The ones who did know I'd moved didn't know why, and I'd asked them to keep it quiet. They respected that. Week 2, my mother's messages turned pleading. She wrote that their renovation wasn't finished, that they needed a place to stay, that surely I wasn't going to leave them without help, that I was their son, for God's sake. I stared at that message for a long time. Their son, the loser who'd never amount to anything. I broke my silence once. A single text to my mother. I wrote that there were hotels in the area, several nice ones, and that she should try the Marriott downtown. Then I blocked both numbers. Update 1. 2 months in, my aunt reached out. She was my mother's sister, someone I'd always gotten along with. She said my parents were confused and hurt, that they didn't understand what happened. She asked if I'd talk to her about it. Just her, no pressure. I met her for coffee during a business trip back east. I didn't tell her I was coming. Just showed up at a place near her house and texted the address. She arrived looking worried, older than I remembered. She asked me what happened. I told her about the phone call. Every detail. What my father had said, how my mother had laughed, how long I'd listened. I told her about the years of subtle digs, the constant implications that I wasn't good enough, the way they'd take credit for my successes and blame me for any setbacks. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said something that surprised me. She told me she'd heard them talk about me like that before. At family gatherings when they thought no one was paying attention. She'd always figured I knew and had just developed thick skin. She didn't realize I'd never heard it directly. I asked her why she never said anything. She looked uncomfortable, said it wasn't her place, that she figured families work things out eventually. I told her that some things you don't work out. Some things you just walk away from. She asked if I'd ever consider talking to them. I said no. She asked if I'd ever forgive them. I said forgiveness wasn't the point. I wasn't angry anymore. I just didn't want them in my life. There was a difference. She hugged me before she left, told me she understood, even if she wished things were different. I appreciated that. I didn't ask her to keep my location secret, but I knew she would. My company hit a major milestone that summer. We closed a Series B funding round, $15 million. It made the tech news sites. My business partner and I were interviewed for a podcast about young entrepreneurs. My parents would have seen it if they were looking. My mother sent an email. She'd gotten the address from my old attorney before I'd had him remove her from his contact list. She wrote that she'd seen the news, that she was proud, that she wanted to talk. She said they'd had time to think, that maybe they'd been too hard on me over the years, that families should stick together. I noticed she didn't apologize, didn't acknowledge what I'd heard. Just wanted to smooth things over now that I was successful enough to be worth claiming again. I didn't respond. Instead, I had my attorney send a formal letter requesting no further contact. It felt cold, but necessary. Like closing a door that should have been closed years ago. Update 2. Year 1 passed. Then year 2. My life in Seattle became my real life. I dated someone for a while, a product manager at a different startup. It didn't work out, but it was good while it lasted. I made new friends, found a climbing gym I loved, adopted a dog named Murphy. I bought a condo overlooking the water. My business thrived. We expanded to 40 employees. I traveled for work, spoke at conferences, built something I was genuinely proud of. The life my parents said I'd never have, I built it without them. Turned out I didn't need their name or their approval. Just needed them out of the way. I heard through my aunt that my parents told people I was working abroad, that we talked regularly, but I was too busy to visit. They'd created a story where they were still involved, still relevant. I didn't bother correcting it. Let them save face. It cost me nothing. Sometimes late at night, I'd think about that phone call. Not with anger anymore, but with something like gratitude. It had given me clarity. Show me what I was really dealing with. Some people spend their whole lives seeking approval from parents who'll never give it. I'd been freed from that. The price was high, but worth it. My business partner asked me once if I had regrets. I thought about it honestly. Told him no. Maybe that made me cold. Maybe it made me smart. Either way, it made me free. Update 3. 3 years after I disappeared, my father had a health scare. Nothing life-threatening, but serious enough that my aunt felt I should know. Heart issue, required surgery, successful procedure. She didn't ask me to visit. Just thought I deserved to know. I sent flowers to the hospital. Anonymous. No card. I wasn't cruel enough to wish him harm, but I wasn't ready to pretend we were family again either. My aunt texted that she understood. That was enough. My mother tried one more time after that. A handwritten letter forwarded through my aunt. Pages of apologies, explanations, justifications. She wrote that she'd been stressed that day, that my father had been frustrated about other things, that I'd taken things the wrong way. She wrote that she'd always loved me, always been proud, even if she didn't show it well. I read it twice. Filed it away in a drawer. Didn't respond. The thing about closure is that sometimes you have to give it to yourself. You can't wait for other people to understand, to apologize correctly, to become who you need them to be. You just have to decide what you can live with and build from there. I could live with this. The distance, the silence, the family that existed in name only. I'd built a life that didn't need their validation. That was my closure. My startup got acquired last month. 8-figure deal. My business partner and I split it 50-50 after everyone else got their shares. Financial security for life, if I'm smart about it. The news made bigger waves this time. Front page of the tech section in major papers. My phone, the new one only real contacts have, stayed quiet. That told me everything I needed to know. I'm 35 now. 3 years since I walked away. People ask sometimes if I have family in the area. I tell them I'm figuring that part out, building my own version of it. That's not a lie. Some stories don't have reconciliation. No tearful reunion, no dramatic forgiveness scene. Sometimes you just quietly remove yourself from a situation that was never going to improve and build something better in the space that's left. That's not tragedy. That's just life. I still think about that phone call sometimes. But now when I do, I don't hear my father's words. I hear the sound of my own voice, making those first calls, taking action, choosing myself. That's the sound I want to remember. The sound of someone finally figuring out what they're worth.